It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when Sarah decided to visit her father. The weather outside was calm, with sunlight filtering through gray clouds, casting a pale golden glow across the old neighborhood. Her father's house, the one she grew up in, looked the same as always, familiar, comforting, yet holding an unsettling silence that came with age. The porch creaked under her feet as she knocked. Her father, a frail man with kind eyes and silver hair, opened the door slowly, greeting her with a tired but genuine smile. Inside, the house smelled faintly of old books and dust, the kind of scent that clings to places untouched by time. Sarah glanced around at the familiar living room, the worn-out sofa, the family portraits hanging slightly crooked on the wall, and the tall wooden cabinet with its glass doors, filled with porcelain figurines her mother once adored. The air felt heavier than she remembered, but she brushed off the thought, sitting with her father for tea. They talked about small things, her work, the garden he no longer tended, and how quiet the house had become. As the afternoon drifted by, Sarah felt a strange urge to capture the moment. "Let's take a photo, Dad," she suggested with a playful tone. Her father chuckled, waving his hand dismissively at first, shy about cameras, as always. But Sarah insisted, reaching for her phone with a smile. She stood beside him, wrapping her arm gently around his shoulder, noticing how fragile he felt beneath her touch. Despite his age, his smile still carried warmth. And for a fleeting moment, it was as though time had rolled back. She held her phone up, angling it to catch both of them in the frame. Behind them, the tall cabinet glimmered faintly in the sunlight streaming through the window. Her father's faint reflection mirrored back at them in the glass, distorted slightly by dust and fingerprints. "Say cheese," she whispered, and snapped the picture. For a moment, it felt like any other photo, just a daughter and her father, frozen in time together. Sarah slipped her phone back into her pocket without even checking the shot. She didn't realize then how important that simple photo would become. To her, it was just a sweet memory, a keepsake of a quiet afternoon with her aging father. But the photo held more than just their faces. It carried something hidden in the background. Something Sarah wouldn't notice until much later that night. Later that night, Sarah sat curled up on her couch, scrolling through her phone absent-mindedly. She wasn't looking for anything in particular, just passing the time. Flipping through work emails, random notifications, and the usual stream of social media posts. Eventually, she opened her camera roll, smiling as she glanced at photos of her dog, a few recipes she had saved, and then the selfie she had taken earlier that day with her father. For a moment, she felt a comforting warmth, his tired smile, her arm around him, the way the late sunlight had cast a soft glow on their faces. But something about the photo made her stop and linger longer than usual. Her eyes wandered past their smiling faces and landed on the background. The tall wooden cabinet, the one that had stood in her father's living room for as long as she could remember, caught her attention. She remembered it being full of porcelain dolls and dusty old trinkets, but in the photo, it looked different. Something about the reflection in the glass made her stomach tighten. It wasn't just her and her father's faint outlines, she said. Looked like there was someone else standing there. Faint, but unmistakable. At first, Sarah thought her eyes were playing tricks on her. She pinched and zoomed into the photo, leaning closer to the screen. The reflection showed a tall, shadow-like figure pressed against the glass from the inside, its posture stiff and unnatural. Its presence seemed wrong, out of place, as though it had been watching them silently while they posed for their cheerful picture. The more she zoomed in, the clearer the figure appeared. Long, sharp outlines of fingers smeared against the cabinet glass, almost as if it were trapped inside. Sarah's heart began to beat faster. She looked around her own apartment, half expecting to see something lurking in the corners. Her rational mind tried to make sense of it. Maybe it was just a trick of the light, or maybe her phone camera had picked up some strange reflection. Yet, the figure didn't look like a trick. It looked intentional, detailed, and disturbingly human in form. She blinked several times, refreshing her screen. But no matter how much she tried to explain it away, the figure remained. She bit her lip, her breathing shallow, staring at the photograph that only hours ago had seemed so ordinary. The warmth she had felt earlier was gone, replaced by an uneasy chill creeping down her spine. Why hadn't she noticed this while standing in the room? Who or what could have possibly appeared in that reflection? Sarah felt a deep instinct that she didn't want the answer, but she also knew she couldn't just ignore it. Something was terribly wrong, and this photograph was the first crack in a reality she thought she understood. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she zoomed in further, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. The figure in the reflection was becoming more and more undeniable. It wasn't just a smudge, a shadow, or a camera glitch. Its outline was sharp, the fingers pressed against the glass to define to be mistaken for anything else. What unsettled her most was the face, or rather, the lack of one. Where features should have been, there was only a blurred, shifting mass, like smoke frozen in place. Every time she looked at it, she thought she saw the suggestion of eyes, but when she blinked, they vanished again. She quickly flipped back to the main gallery, then opened the photo again, hoping it would disappear, that maybe her phone had glitched, but it was still there, staring back at her. Worse, she realized something she hadn't noticed before. The reflection made it look like the figure was standing directly between her and her father, as though it had been part of the picture all along, only invisible to their naked eyes. Her mouth went dry. She replayed the moment in her head. She remembered clearly that no one else had been in the room. They had been alone. Her breathing quickened as a darker thought pushed its way into her mind. That old cabinet, hadn't it been shut tight? She remembered it, clearly, sealed with its brass handle locked in place. It had always been more of a display case, not something anyone touched since her mother's death. But in the photo, those long fingers pressing outward gave the impression that whatever was inside wasn't meant to be there, and worse, that it wanted out. Sarah's first instinct was to call her father. She dialed his number quickly, listening to the dull ring on the other end. Once, twice, 3 times. No answer. She tried again, and again, pacing across her small apartment with the phone pressed tightly to her ear. Still nothing. Her father wasn't the type to leave his phone unattended, especially at night. A gnawing sense of dread settled in her chest, making her feel as though the photo wasn't just strange, it was a warning. She sat down on the edge of her bed, clutching her phone tightly. The thought of going back to that house made her uneasy, yet the thought of not going terrified her even more. That reflection, that impossible figure, it wasn't something she could ignore anymore. It wasn't just a trick of light. Something had been there with them in the room, watching, hidden in plain sight. And now she couldn't shake the feeling that it might still be there. The next morning, Sarah barely slept. Her mind replayed the photo again and again, and each time she saw the shadow more vividly, as if her memory was sharpening it. By sunrise, she couldn't resist any longer. She needed to check on her father. She drove through the quiet streets, her hands gripping the steering wheel, her stomach in knots. As she pulled into the familiar driveway, her heart sank. The front door was slightly ajar, swaying with the breeze. Her father was careful about locking up. This was wrong, deeply wrong. She stepped out of the car, every sound amplified, the crunch of gravel beneath her shoes, the faint creak of the old wooden porch. "Dad," she called, her voice shaking despite her effort to sound calm. There was no answer. Pushing the door open, she was met with a wave of silence. The house felt colder than usual, its air heavy and stale. The living room lay just as she remembered, except for one glaring detail. The cabinet, the one in the photograph, was standing wide open. Her eyes widened. The glass doors of the cabinet were pulled apart, their hinges groaning softly as if they had been forced. Inside, the shelves that once held porcelain dolls and trinkets were nearly empty, a thin layer of dust outlining where objects had once sat. But it wasn't just the emptiness that chilled her, it was what lay behind it. The wallpaper on the wall inside the cabinet had been torn open, jagged edges curling outward, revealing a dark, hollow space beyond. Sarah stepped closer, her breath caught in her throat. The torn wallpaper revealed not just the wooden framework of the house, but an opening like a hidden passage leading into complete blackness. She leaned in slightly, her ears straining. For a moment, it was silent. Then, faintly, almost like a breeze carrying a voice, she thought she heard whispering. It was low, unintelligible, but it sent a shiver racing down her spine. She staggered back, her pulse hammering. Her phone buzzed suddenly, startling her so much she almost dropped it. She fumbled to check the screen. It was a message from her father's number. Relief surged until she read the words. "Don't trust what you saw. I'm still here." She froze. There was no timestamp, no delivery icon. It didn't look like a normal message at all. Her trembling fingers hovered over the screen as the whispering from the dark hollow seemed to grow louder, as though responding to the words she had just read. Sarah's hands tightened around her phone as the message burned in her mind. "Don't trust what you saw. I'm still here." Her throat went dry. It was her father's number, but something about it felt off. No timestamp, no sign it had even been sent in the usual way. She tried calling him immediately, her trembling thumb pressing the call icon, but the line only rang once before going dead. Replaced with static so faint it almost sounded like voices whispering through the signal. She yanked the phone away from her ear, her heart racing. She forced herself to look back toward the gaping hollow behind the cabinet. The whispering she thought she heard before was louder now, faint but steady, like a chorus of voices murmuring from within the darkness. It wasn't clear speech, more like overlapping murmurs that carried emotion without words: fear, pleading, anger. She swallowed hard, torn between stepping closer to listen or running out of the house entirely. Her father could be in there, her mind insisted, but her instinct screamed at her to stay away. Taking a shaky step forward, she called out softly, "Dad, are you in there?" The whispers seemed to shift at the sound of her voice, rising and falling as though answering, though she couldn't make out the words. Goosebumps prickled across her skin. She crouched lower, her phone flashlight illuminating the ragged wallpaper edges. The hollow inside looked like it led deeper into the walls, far beyond what should exist in the structure of the house. This wasn't a storage space or a crawl space, it was something else entirely. Something that had been hidden. Suddenly, her phone buzzed again. Another message appeared, same number, same lack of timestamp. Don't listen to them. Her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the device. Them. Who was them? The whispers grew sharper now, almost urgent, overlapping in a way that felt deliberate, as though they wanted her to hear and understand if only she would lean closer. Her father's warning clashed violently in her head with the pull of those voices, and the uncertainty gnawed at her until she felt paralyzed. Her breathing quickened, the air around her heavier by the second. It felt as though the walls themselves were leaning in, listening. She realized with a chilling certainty that the whispers weren't just random sounds, they were aware of her presence. They were responding to her. And somewhere, in that impossible darkness behind the torn wallpaper, something or someone was waiting. With shaking hands, Sarah pulled up the photo again, hoping desperately that maybe she had imagined everything. But the moment the screen lit up, her stomach dropped. The image wasn't the same anymore. Her father's face looked different. His smile, once faint but warm, now seemed strained, his skin unnaturally pale. His eyes, which had twinkled with tired kindness that afternoon, appeared dull and hollow, like something was draining the life out of him, even inside the still frame. Sarah blinked rapidly, rubbing her eyes, but when she looked again, the photo had worsened. Her focus shifted to the shadowy figure in the cabinet's reflection. This time, it wasn't blurry. It was becoming sharper, clearer, as though it was evolving inside the picture itself. Its head tilted slightly, as if acknowledging her. The long bony fingers that had once looked pressed against the glass were now curling outward, reaching closer into the frame, stretching toward her father's shoulder. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The figure wasn't just in the reflection anymore, it was interacting with them. Her pulse hammered in her ears as she stared, frozen. She tried refreshing the image, closing and reopening it, but each time, the changes grew worse. Now, the figure's face was no longer a blur. It resembled her father, but distorted, a younger version of him, sharper features, but with eyes black as voids. It was like looking at a cruel copy of him, a twisted double standing in the background, and the real father in the photo looked weaker by the second, as though his life force was being siphoned away into that reflection. Suddenly, her phone screen flickered. The photo distorted for a split second, glitching as though the device itself was resisting. When it stabilized, Sarah gasped aloud. Her own reflection had changed too. Her face in the photo looked drained, her skin pale, her smile frozen unnaturally wide, her eyes lifeless. She staggered back, nearly dropping the phone. The realization struck her like ice. Whatever was happening wasn't just to her father. It was happening to her too. Sarah's body trembled as she clutched the phone, her heart racing so fast it hurt. She didn't understand how it was possible, but the photo was alive, shifting, capturing something beyond reality. Her father's faint warning replayed in her mind. Don't trust what you saw. But staring into those dark, mirrored eyes staring back at her from the photo, she wondered if she had already gone too far, if the thing inside the reflection wasn't just watching anymore, but pulling her into its world. A loud crash shattered the silence, echoing through the house. Sarah's head snapped upward. It had come from upstairs, her father's bedroom. Her legs moved before her mind could process, each step on the staircase creaking like a warning. The air grew colder the higher she climbed, thick and suffocating, carrying a faint smell of damp wood and something metallic. She whispered her father's name, but her voice felt swallowed by the silence, as if the house itself refused to let sound linger. When she reached the top of the stairs, her breath hitched. The door to her father's bedroom stood slightly open, the same way the front door had. Slowly, she pushed it wider, her fingers trembling against the wood. The room was pristine, unsettlingly so. The bed was neatly made, the blanket tucked in perfectly as though no one had slept there. The curtains were drawn tight, shutting out all traces of morning light. But the strangest detail sat directly on the bed, something that didn't belong. A photograph. It was printed, glossy, lying perfectly centered on the pillow. Sarah's knees weakened as she recognized it immediately. It was the same picture she had taken just yesterday with her father, but this version wasn't the same. Her own face was missing. She was gone, erased from the memory entirely. Only her father remained, standing in that same living room, but he was no longer smiling. His pale, sunken face stared back at her, and beside him stood the shadowy figure, now completely clear, its black eyes burning into the camera lens. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, startling her. She pulled it out with shaking hands. A notification lit the screen, another message from her father's number. This time, only 2 words appeared. Too late. The timestamp was blank again. She wanted to scream, to run, but her body refused to move. The house felt alive, every wall pressing inward, every shadow stretching closer. She looked back at the printed photograph, her stomach twisting in horror. Because now, in the reflection of the cabinet behind her father and the figure, something new had appeared. A blurred, faint outline of her standing in the background where the shadow once had been. Sarah's breath came in shallow gasps as her eyes locked on the printed photograph. The outline of herself in the reflection grew sharper with every passing second, her features slowly forming as though the picture were alive, pulling her into its frame. She stumbled back, clutching her phone, but the air around her felt heavy, almost sticky. Holding her in place, the whispers she had heard earlier now filled the room, louder, clearer, no longer muffled. They were chanting her name. The walls groaned, the floorboards trembled, and the shadows in the corners stretched unnaturally toward her. She tried to scream, but the sound caught in her throat, silenced by an unseen force. Her phone flickered one last time. The photo she had taken with her father glowed faintly on the screen, but now it looked exactly like the printed one. She was no longer in it. Her hands shook as she dropped the device to the floor, the screen cracking on impact. She turned toward the mirror on the dresser, desperate to ground herself in reality. But what she saw froze her blood. Her reflection was gone. The last thing Sarah remembered before the room went completely dark was the faint click of a camera shutter, as though someone or something had just taken her picture. And from that day forward, no one ever saw Sarah again. Only the photograph remained, her father, the shadow, and an empty space where she should have been.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.